In the heart of Deir el-Balah, a lone Red Cross vehicle moves slowly through streets coated in dust and silence. Around it, the city stands scarred, walls collapsed, windows shattered, and the air still heavy with the scent of smoke and fuel. Inside the vehicle, humanitarian workers sit quietly, focused on a duty that carries both sorrow and significance. Today, Israel has announced that it has received the bodies of 2 hostages who were held in Gaza by Hamas. The transfer, confirmed through the International Committee of the Red Cross, is part of the ongoing implementation of the ceasefire agreement in the war-torn enclave. It is a scene that blends the logistical precision of diplomacy with the deep pain of human loss. For weeks, negotiations had taken place behind closed doors in Doha, in Cairo, in Tel Aviv, aimed at easing tensions and recovering both the living and the dead. Today's handover represents the latest chapter in that process, one written not in words, but in silence and grief. As the Red Cross vehicle advances, its familiar white emblem with the Crimson Cross stands out amid the grey of broken concrete. The symbol, once distant, has now become a near-daily sight across Gaza. In each convoy, it carries medical supplies, aid workers, and sometimes the remains of those who will not return alive. According to Israeli officials, the 2 victims were among those abducted during the surprise Hamas attacks on communities near the Gaza border in October 2024. More than 200 people were taken in that operation, which ignited one of the most devastating phases of conflict in recent memory. Israel says both bodies were identified through information passed to mediators and confirmed by forensic teams before the transfer. For the Red Cross, this operation is purely humanitarian, a delicate and dangerous mission in an environment where every movement must be coordinated to the minute. Every return, every recovery, said one Red Cross representative, reminds us of the human cost of war and the importance of upholding dignity, even in death. That dignity is what drives this scene. Workers wear protective vests, their hands steady as they open the vehicle's rear doors. A stretcher emerges, covered by a plain white sheet. There are no flags, no speeches, only the faint hum of generators and the distant murmur of reporters. The body is carried gently toward the designated exchange point under supervision from both sides. For the residents of Deir el-Balah, the convoy passes like a ghost, solemn, efficient, and watched from afar. In the background, displaced families peer from tents that line the road, their faces reflecting both exhaustion and empathy. Many here have lost relatives in the bombings, others still wait for news of missing loved ones. Israel's statement came soon after the Red Cross confirmed completion of the transfer. The government said it remains committed to bringing all hostages home, living and deceased, and thanked international partners for their continued mediation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, addressing his security cabinet, said, "Our responsibility is not only to our fallen, but to those who still breathe under captivity. We will not rest until every citizen is accounted for." The Hostage Families Forum, a grassroots movement representing relatives of those taken on October 7th, also released a statement. It read, "Every return is both a closure and a wound reopened. We ask our government to treat this mission with urgency and compassion, for each delay deepens the suffering of the families." Across Israel, flags flew at half-mast. In Tel Aviv, hundreds gathered near the central square, where pictures of the hostages have been displayed for months. Candles burned beside 2 new portraits, their names written in blue marker, surrounded by flowers and notes from strangers who never met them. The ceasefire that allowed this transfer remains fragile. Brokered by Qatar and Egypt, it calls for a temporary halt in hostilities and limited humanitarian access. While the Red Cross continues to deliver aid across parts of Gaza, sporadic exchanges of fire have been reported near Khan Yunis and Rafah. Diplomats describe the situation as one step forward, one step back, with each successful exchange depending on hours of negotiation and verification. Inside Gaza, the humanitarian crisis persists. Hospitals in Deir el-Balah and Gaza City report chronic shortages of anesthesia, antibiotics, and fuel for generators. Doctors work through the night, performing surgeries by flashlight. For them, each ceasefire day is a race against time to treat as many wounded as possible before fighting resumes. The International Committee of the Red Cross has warned that without sustained access, its operations could collapse. We can only act when both sides commit to respecting humanitarian corridors, said the organization's regional director. If those corridors close, so too does hope. Today's operation, however, offered a glimpse of coordination, a fragile but vital link between enemies. The bodies were transported from Gaza through a secure route toward the Kerem Shalom crossing, where Israeli medical teams stood ready. Forensic experts then began the process of verification, matching DNA samples with pre-war records and family data. Within hours, confirmation was made and the remains were handed over to relatives. In Jerusalem, news of the return spread quietly. There were no official ceremonies, only private farewells. Religious leaders across denominations, Jewish, Christian and Muslim, expressed condolences and urged continued dialogue. Every human being deserves a name, a burial and peace, said the chief rabbi in a televised statement. International reaction followed swiftly. The White House called the transfer a step forward in an otherwise dire humanitarian landscape. European leaders echoed the sentiment, emphasizing that humanitarian coordination must not be interrupted, even as political disagreements deepen. At the United Nations, the Secretary-General called it a somber reminder of how every effort toward peace begins with the acknowledgement of loss. Analysts say such recoveries, while small in number, hold immense symbolic importance. Each exchange builds trust, or at least the minimal understanding necessary for further negotiation. In this case, the act of returning the bodies is seen as part of a broader diplomatic rhythm. Hostages released in exchange for pauses in combat, aid shipments for humanitarian guarantees, and now the repatriation of the dead for continued talks. Behind the scenes, discussions are already underway to extend the current ceasefire. Mediators in Doha say both sides are considering another 72-hour pause, though disagreements remain over the sequencing of prisoner releases and the scope of Israeli surveillance flights. Officials familiar with the talks describe them as delicate but not hopeless. Still, every operation carries immense risk. For Red Cross workers, travelling through frontline zones requires advanced coordination with both militaries. Routes must be cleared, checkpoints verified, and curfews lifted for limited windows. Any miscommunication could trigger gunfire or airstrikes. Yet, despite these dangers, convoys continue to move, carrying medicine, fuel, and sometimes the remains of the fallen. Inside the Red Cross compound in Gaza, staff described their work as emotionally taxing. One medic said, "When we recover a body, it is not just a number. It is a person with a family waiting. That is what gives us strength to go back out tomorrow." That human element resonates beyond borders. In Israel, funerals for returned hostages are often attended by hundreds of strangers, people seeking closure, unity, or simply to bear witness. For the families still waiting, each return rekindles hope that their loved ones might soon follow. In Gaza, residents watching from the roadside interpret the convoys differently. For them, the Red Cross vehicles symbolize both compassion and contradiction, proof that international organizations can enter, but also a reminder of how little control civilians have over their fate. A father standing near Deir el-Balah's main road put it simply, if they can take bodies out, maybe one day they can bring medicine in. The broader geopolitical implications remain complex. This exchange, though humanitarian, comes as regional powers reassess their roles in mediation. Egypt continues to host security delegations, while Qatar maintains its role as a financial and diplomatic intermediary. The United States supports these efforts quietly, emphasizing stability and hostage recovery over broader political recognition. Observers note that each successful handover, living or deceased, strengthens the argument for continued diplomacy. It shows that even amid deep mistrust, coordination is possible when human lives are at stake. As evening falls over Deir el-Balah, the Red Cross vehicles disappear beyond the horizon, leaving behind a landscape marked by silence. In the fading light, the red emblem glows faintly against the dust, a symbol not of victory, but of endurance. This was not a military achievement, nor a political triumph. It was a moment of humanity in the middle of devastation, a reminder that compassion can still move through checkpoints and across battle lines. Israel's receipt of the two bodies may not change the course of the war, but for the families involved, it means the difference between uncertainty and farewell. For negotiators, it serves as proof that fragile cooperation can work, even briefly. And for those still waiting on both sides of the border, it is a reminder that every life and every return matters. The roads of Gaza remain scarred, the truce remains uncertain, and diplomacy remains slow. But as one Red Cross worker said while closing the van doors, even when peace feels far away, humanity must keep moving. And so, under the dim light of dusk, the last vehicle rolls away, carrying with it the quiet echo of dignity restored, a rare and fragile moment of mercy amid a war that has already taken so much.